Alright, I was in the mood to ruffle some feathers today, so we're gonna talk about the most influential game in every genre. And I know a lot of people have a lot of different opinions. What does influential mean? Influential is different for different people. Everyone started playing at different times, all these things. So I expect people are gonna have very different opinions from me. So, if you do, I would love to hear them. Comment down below what I got wrong, what I got right, and any genres that I might have missed, because I'm not going to cover everything. And that brings us into the 4 or 5 things that I want to cover before we start. First, I am a young person. I have not played a lot of retro games, so these games are mostly going to be either modern-ish games or games that directly influenced modern games. Second, and that was kind of what I said before, is that I'm not covering every genre here. I don't have much to say about horror games, RTS games, even racing games. So those are 3 major genres that I'm not really going to cover because I just wouldn't have anything meaningful to say really, and I don't want to waste anyone's time, you know what I mean? Third is that I'm trying to not pick games from the first entry of a series. So it would be kind of boring, right? To be like, oh, the first Call of Duty was super influential because it started Call of Duty. That's kind of boring. We're going to go a little bit more niche, a little bit more creative with them. Also, we're going to talk about influence on the entire gaming landscape, not just influence on the specific genre. So if a game didn't exactly reinvent a genre, but it had influence on a broader scope, that's definitely applicable. And there are some that fall into that category. And finally, I'm talking about influence and impact. If I say something like Fortnite was a pioneer of the battle royale genre, don't come at me and say, well, actually, there was a game that was released in the sub-Saharan region of Africa that only was playable on Coca-Cola brand arcade machine. Like, no, don't do that. Go back to your Reddit dungeon hole and leave me and my list alone, okay? So let's get into it with the first entry on the most impactful games from each genre. Pokemon Gen 2 Gold and Silver has my pick for the most influential JRPG of all time. First of all, I think it has to be a Pokemon game. I don't think, and feel free to get mad at me for this, but I don't think that JRPGs would be as popular in the Americas or even anywhere outside of Japan if it wasn't for Pokemon. I think that Pokemon really brought the JRPG genre from just being a Japanese thing to being a worldwide phenomenon, right? And you might have the question, if it's Pokemon, why not the original? Well, first of all, don't want to do the original in every series. But second of all, I think that Gold and Silver, the originals, are both better games than Red and Blue, and also more impactful. And we're going to talk about that, obviously. That's what this video is about, right? The first reason is that I don't think Pokemon would have taken off if it wasn't for the sequels, right? Pokemon Red and Blue was great. Like, people loved those games, and they were very popular. But without a sequel that really surpassed the original games and did everything better and bigger, I don't think it would have taken off. I don't think I would have been collecting Pokemon cards and playing Pokemon games 30 years after a release if it wasn't for these games. Second is the post-game content. These games really started the whole post-game content thing, and it's something that's almost expected in JRPGs now, and honestly in all games now. Once you finish the game in Gold and Silver, you have a whole nother region to go through. So when you finish the game, you're only about 60% done, which is kind of what a lot of games strive to achieve in their post-game content, right? It was like the first New Game Plus, if you could say that. I mean, it wasn't really, because it was honestly easier than the original, than the main part of the game, but whatever, you know what I mean. It was something that fans still look for in games, some sort of post-game content that's this expansive and this detailed, and we honestly really haven't seen it since. This is the best post-game content in any game in history, and it has to be my pick for the most influential JRPG of all time. This next one is probably the hardest for me to pick. I mean, how do you pick from like Halo, like Combat Evolved, to like Doom and Half-Life, Counter-Strike. Like there's so many games that both are in this genre, because first-person shooters is like one of, if not the biggest genre in gaming. But also so many different ways this genre has been shaped over the years that it was just so hard to pick. But I've gone with Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. Before this game, Call of Duty was a pretty grounded military shooter. It was mostly World War II based, and it was pretty realistic. This game took a step towards, more sci-fi elements without going full, Halo with it, you know what I mean? And I think this is why this game is so influential. If you look at first-person shooters and the most popular ones, they almost always lie somewhere between realistic and sci-fi, right? Battlefield, Counter-Strike, Wolfenstein. All of these games are based on real life and the movement is real for the most part, or there's elements of realism, but there's also elements of sci-fi, and they kind of walk right in the middle. And I think Call of Duty Modern Warfare kind of started that whole thing. Like, yes, you still have your total sci-fi and your total war sim games, but I think that the most popular FPS games are somewhere in the middle, and I think that's all thanks to Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Alright, this is an obvious one. I'll keep it short. And I know I said I'm not going to pick any first game in the series or first game in the genre titles, but it's Tetris. It has to be Tetris, right? Like, I couldn't find or think about another option that even came close to Tetris for the most influential puzzle games of all time. I mean, Tetris, like, what else is there to say, right? It's probably the reason gaming is so mainstream today. It was the first game that grasped all audiences. Like, before Tetris, and for a little bit after even, gaming was this really niche, nerdy hobby. And then Tetris came out on the Game Boy, and you could just play it wherever, pick it up for a couple minutes. There's zero learning curve. The only difficulty is when you get later and it gets faster, and you mess up a bit and it like stacks up, and that's the only difficulty. There's no learning curve, there's no story, there's no levels. It's just pure puzzle fun, and anyone can get into it, which is what made Tetris just so revolutionary, really. So not only did Tetris impact the puzzle genre, it also kind of created its own little subgenre, in my opinion, that I like to call Facebook mom games. Kind of like Candy Crush, right? Candy Crush is a game, I'm explaining it Candy Crush, but you know what I mean. It's a game where, you pop little things that make a line, make a shape, pops. It's like Tetris, right? Tetris was a massive hit due to its Game Boy launch and the fact that you could just pick it up, play for a couple minutes, and then put it down and be completely satisfied. And this kind of gameplay is directly tied to mobile games we have now, like Candy Crush, as I said before, the Facebook mom genre of gaming, you know what I mean? Candy Crush is the same thing as Tetris, and there's lots of other games like this, You connect things, make lines or shapes, and they pop. Boom. Tetris. Candy Crush is one of the most successful games of all time, and it's a free-to-play game, and that's insane, right? And I think Tetris directly influenced that. So if there's any Facebook moms who have multiple credit cards to fuel their Candy Crush addiction, you can thank Tetris, or sue them, either or. Alright, this one is gonna raise some eyebrows, I already know, but for roguelike, I'm gonna have to go with Hades, and I know what you're thinking. Hades is like, what, 5 years old? Roguelikes have been around forever. How can you pick such a new game? Listen, alright? I wasn't gonna pick Rogue, that would be extremely boring. But even older games, like, I think Hades really took, like, the indie roguelike genre and ramped it up, like, tenfold. Before this, the indie roguelike genre existed, but now it's one of the most popular genres of games we have, right? Hades was also the first indie game, in my knowledge, to win Game of the Year, which kind of started this whole hipster trend in gaming where indie games can be just as popular as AAA games. And I think that's due to Hades. I think Hades really started to make people think, oh shit, indie games can be this polished and this fun and also quite a bit cheaper. So I think we have Hades to thank for a lot of what's going on with indie games, roguelikes, and that kind of thing. There's two modern games, in my opinion, that really defined the RPG or the Western RPG genre. And that's Skyrim, which kind of got everyone in the door, probably grew the genre by like 20% just on its own, and Baldur's Gate 3, which everyone that came from Skyrim, already into it, realized, oh, this can be a lot more complicated and fun. It's not scary if there's like a bunch of things to focus on. It actually makes it more fun. So with that being said, those are the two that were like going on in my head. I gotta go with Skyrim. It started it, and as much as I love Baldur's Gate 3, you've probably heard me talk about it if you watch this channel, probably my favorite game of all time, but Skyrim started it. That is the most influential Western RPG in my opinion. And I know, there was Oblivion and Morrowind before that, but Skyrim took what those things did and made it super mainstream, right? Like, it was a gaming craze that I have never seen before that or since then for one singular game. It was insane. I mean, maybe you could argue like Fortnite or Minecraft was as big of a phenomenon, but if you're around for Skyrim, man, like that was crazy and still is. Like, the fact that people are playing it this much after release and it's a single player game, like that's insane, right? The real impact Skyrim had on gaming was with the open world. The freedom this game gives you is insane. Or at least it was insane. It's still insane, but it was insane for the time. It took the whole like go from point A to point B and complete a story kind of thing, threw it out the window and said, no, just exist in the world, run into problems, run into solutions, just do your thing at your own pace and complete it however you want. And that really took games that we thought were open world and made them look linear, really, is what Skyrim did. And I think that people are still trying to capture this same feeling in games, and few do it, right? And sure, it didn't reinvent RPG mechanics, right? It didn't, bring us anything that was brand new in terms of, gameplay. The combat, yeah, it was outdated even when it released, but just the open world aspect of it, the way it impacted and redefined what an open world should play like and should feel like, I think it has to earn a spot on this list. And even if you think a different game was more influential for whatever reason, I don't think you can really argue with Skyrim being one of the most influential games in the Western RPG genre. And quickly before we move on, the other thing that Skyrim impacted was the modding space and the modding community, right? The modding community in Skyrim is rivaled pretty much only with Minecraft. And Minecraft is a sandbox game that's supposed to be messed with, right? Skyrim is an open world RPG. It has a main story, and it still gets incredible modding support. And I think there's a lot of people who started modding because of Skyrim, or downloaded their first mod for Skyrim, you know what I mean? I think that the way that this has taken modding and downloading mods from like a really technical, nerdy thing into something that kind of we all do on a day-to-day basis as PC players, I think that's due to Skyrim. And we did have modding before that, like obviously Half-Life was huge for modding, but I think Skyrim took it from niche to mainstream in a way that no other game really could do. Alright, it pains me not to put the original Super Mario Bros. On this list. Oh, speaking of, I bought this mug the other day, a Canadian Tire Super Mario Bros. Mug, isn't that cool? Anyways, it pains me not to put Super Mario Bros. On this list, like the original, but I didn't want to do the first game of a series and all that, even though that game did kind of save gaming after the 1983 crash and everything, and it did pretty much invent this genre. I didn't want to use it, and we have a really good option that's also, in my opinion, just as influential as that game in Super Mario 64. I have said before that I am not really the biggest fan of Super Mario 64. I love Mario games, love them, but I don't know, I'm more a 2D platformer kind of guy. Super Mario 64 never really grabbed me the way it grabbed a lot of people, but I cannot deny its influence on the genre and gaming, right? It didn't invent the 3D platformer, but it was definitely the most popular, the first very popular one, but that's not what we're talking about. The thing that I think 64 did the most for gaming was the camera angle. And what I mean by this is the way the camera moves with you, the way you can rotate it, and the way it fixes itself when you go underneath something or into, inside something. That was revolutionary. And it might sound silly now, but truly revolutionary. Before Super Mario 64, cameras in 3D games were almost always fixed, and if they weren't, they sucked, right? Like, Super Mario 64 pretty much showed developers this is what a 3D game should feel like when the player is controlling a camera. Like, it set the precedent for what 3D platformers and 3D games as a whole need to do with their camera angles and camera work. This is one example of a game that was amazing, but had a negative impact on gaming. And that's Minecraft. Let me give you a scenario. You're at dinner, you're with your missus, and you're having a great time. The food's good, you got a bottle of wine, everything's good. You're laughing, you're having fun. Table sits next to you. Who could it be that could ruin the entire night? Who could possibly sit down that could make the evening not worth having? Two parents and an iPad kid. And I think Minecraft is the reason for the era of iPad kids, you know what I mean? And I love Minecraft. I played Minecraft my whole childhood. I still play Minecraft. I think it's probably one of the best games ever made. But I do think it started the iPad kid era. If you think about it, the iPad came out in 2010 and Minecraft came out in 2011, released publicly, right? I think that the way it was suited so much for kids and the way that technology had adapted to the point where kids were able to use it easily, those things worked so well together and created an absolute monster of, kids on iPads way too much, and kids being, homeschooled by iPads pretty much. But I fear that I'm going to sound really grumpy, so, I'm going to stop myself from being that 20-year-old kid giving parental advice, and let's talk about what Minecraft did for the survival genre and just, other games. I think the main thing that Minecraft did was take something that we all thought was boring and dumb and turn it into something that people kept on trying to replicate and kept on failing at. And that's procedural generated worlds. Before Minecraft, procedural generated worlds were kind of like, yeah, don't do that. And even now they're like, you kind of stay away from that because there's the fear that it's going to be lifeless and boring and repetitive. But Minecraft did something insane. Like, they did something crazy with it, where because you were allowed to do whatever you wanted and completely, you could break every single block on the entire map. It would take a couple years of your life off, but you could do it. And for that reason, the procedural generated worlds never felt old, right? And not only that, every single world was different. You were never going to go into the same world twice, right? So with those two things working together, it made procedural generation feel like the best possible outcome for the game. Like, if they had handcrafted every single level, we wouldn't have had a game like Minecraft. And I think a lot of games, I'm sure you can think of a few, have tried to use this procedural generation the same kind of way, not even come close to the same outcome that Minecraft was able to. And eventually, I think we'll start seeing better procedural generation, and I think that eventually most games are going to be procedural generated, and that might sound scary, but it will become so good at one point that you won't even notice. And I think that'll all be thanks to Minecraft, right? And the way it enriched the survival genre, you weren't just surviving a set amount of nights. You weren't just surviving for long enough so that you could get strong enough to beat the final boss or escape or whatever. Surviving and living in the world was the game. Like, that was the core element of the game. And that kind of changed the whole survival genre, right? All right, this one is the second and last one that will be the first game of a series. And this is Mortal Kombat from 1992, the original Mortal Kombat. And I couldn't not have Mortal Kombat. It changed everything about gaming. When Mortal Kombat came out, every other fighting game, and really every other game, was pretty kid-friendly. Like, there was not much violence. Well, violence maybe, but it was cartoon violence. There was no gore, no blood, and it was all like, arcade kind of things for kids, whatever. But then Mortal Kombat came out, and the violence and the gore was a key part of what made that game so good, and people loved it so much that the world took notice and the ERSB had to be invented because of Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat's the reason that we have rating systems on games. Mortal Kombat's the reason that you had to get your friend's chill parent to pick you up a second copy of GTA. You know what I mean? If we didn't have Mortal Kombat, and I know another game would have come in and done it, but if we followed that logic, this video would be very confusing. If we didn't have Mortal Kombat, we wouldn't have had mature games. We wouldn't have had games made for adults. And now that everyone who played games back then is an adult, and a lot of them are still playing games, I think we have Mortal Kombat to thank for that. It really took gaming from something that was meant for kids and made people realize it can be for adults too. It shouldn't always be for kids, you know? Competitive gaming also took off because of Mortal Kombat. Before Mortal Kombat, most games were either easy, easy to learn, hard to learn maybe, but easy to get good at, or just complete button mashing until something sticks, you know? Mortal Kombat had a fighting system that had an incredible skill gap. You could get into it pretty easily, but to get good, it was a challenge. And that skill gap kind of started this whole competitive gaming thing and turned it into something that we see with like esports now, and made game developers realize that maybe we should be making games to be played competitively. And I think that's all because of Mortal Kombat. Remember when I said Minecraft was a great game that had a negative impact on gaming? Well, this is a bad game that has an even more negative impact on gaming. And I'm talking about FIFA Ultimate Team. And I'm kind of cheating here. FIFA, comes out with a new game every year, but Ultimate Team's always there, right? So I'm not going to pick, FIFA 11, 12, 13. No one really cares which one it is. I'm just going to talk about Ultimate Team as a whole. And look, I love FIFA. I am a big FIFA fan. I don't really play as much anymore because it's a massive time sink and I just have a lot of things to do. But I'm a huge football fan, huge soccer fan, whatever you want to call it. So I love these games. But they have had a very negative impact on gaming. And it's all in the microtransactions. Every single sports game now has to have an Ultimate Team mode. And for those of you who don't know, an Ultimate Team mode is where you open packs, you get players in those packs, and you put them into your team and you can play against people online. But you got to pay money for the packs, right? So you're buying packs, people can rip like thousands of packs in a day, spending thousands of dollars, and have the best team possible in like 24 hours, right? And this kind of pay to win microtransaction kind of thing started with FIFA and now is in every single sports game. Like every single sports game from a major publisher is pay to win and has ridiculous amounts of microtransactions. And in my opinion, that's all because of FIFA. And you could even make the argument that FIFA started the whole microtransaction thing in all genres. I mean, all of the, controversy around microtransactions kind of started 5-10 years ago. There was microtransactions before that, but they were, less talked about. Ultimate Team came out in 2008, so they've been doing it for a while, right? I think that FIFA really normalized microtransactions, especially in sports games, and I think that that impact on gaming and the amount of money that they were able to make from those microtransactions really influenced other developers to think, hey, why don't we do microtransactions? You know what I mean? And you can also make the argument that FIFA was one of the first live service games, right? And I'm not talking about MMOs and stuff. I'm talking about games like you play by yourself, maybe like against other people, but they keep on giving you content every other day, every week or whatever. You can make the argument that it was one of the first ones of those. And we all hate live service games, right? So I don't know. I think FIFA Ultimate Team especially had a horrible impact on gaming. So that was my list of every genre's most impactful or influential game. I know a lot of you are going to disagree, and I would love to hear your picks for the genres that I talked about, and I would also love to hear what the most influential horror game, RTS game, or racing game is, because those are three genres that I don't really play a whole lot. So if you have any opinions on what those are, please let me know. I would love to hear it. Let me know what game out of this list is your favorite to play, right? That's also a fun topic of discussion. So if you like this video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. This is my third time recording it because my camera died and then I ran out of storage. So thank me for my hard work. But anyways, I've been Janky. Stay tuned for all the latest gaming news, controversies, and discussions, and I will catch you in the next one.